Champagne flutes shimmered beneath the crystal light as Evelyn Cooper steadied the tray in her gloved hands, her breath trembling with anticipation. Beneath the fine gleam of the golden harp's chandeliers, where velvet shadows mingled with warm candlelight, she stood cloaked not in silk or satin, but in the modest armor of a waitress, a black pencil skirt hugging her hips, a crisp white blouse buttoned to her throat, and a small apron bearing the restaurant's golden insignia. The final touch, a snowy wig and oversized tortoiseshell glasses, rendered her utterly unrecognizable, even to herself. Her heart pounded beneath the fabric, faster than the soft jazz unfurling through the grand hall. Evelyn cast one final glance in the mirror of the staff locker room, her eyes lingering on the soft fatigue etched in their corners. 10 years of marriage, of hope dashed and revived, had quietly taken their toll. Still, she remained beautiful in that quiet, enduring way only those forged by hardship could be. In the hidden compartment of her purse, she checked once more. Yes, still there. A single white envelope. Inside it, the miracle that had rewritten her future in delicate ink. After countless failures, a trail of doctors, and IVF heartbreaks, she was finally pregnant. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind like a secret hymn. The envelope held more than test results. It carried a decade of longing, a triumph of perseverance. David had no idea. He thought she was at home, simmering stew for dinner. He had no inkling that tonight she would serve him not a meal, but a dream. Evelyn had orchestrated every detail with the help of Igor Peterson, the restaurant's gracious director and their family friend. She would appear before David, disguised and anonymous, and present him the envelope on a silver tray, nestled among champagne and celebration. He would lift his eyes and, recognizing her, his world would halt. A grand moment, carefully crafted, a gesture as extravagant and heartfelt as his proposal a decade earlier, when he rented an entire restaurant and scattered rose petals at her feet, whispering, "You deserve only the best, my dear." How far they had come, and how far apart they had drifted. The path had not been kind. For the first 2 years, they tried naturally, naive, optimistic. When nothing happened, the tests began. Blood work, scans, diagnoses delivered in cold, sterile rooms like life sentences. Then came the IVF rounds, each one a mountain of hope, each ending in silent grief. Just 3 months ago, they had left the clinic hand in hand after another failed attempt. David squeezing her fingers in the car, whispering, "We'll get through this, dear. We'll definitely get through this." She had believed him then, completely. But something had changed. Over the years, David retreated behind the polished glass of his growing advertising agency, Prestige. He buried himself in campaigns and client dinners, leaving Evelyn to the quiet rhythm of dinners for one, of falling asleep with his side of the bed untouched. His absences stretched longer, his excuses grew thinner. Yet she told herself it was how he coped, with ambition, with disappointment, with the ache of failure neither could speak aloud. Still, Evelyn had never stopped believing in them, until tonight. It was now 6:30. In 30 minutes, the ballroom would bloom with champagne and laughter. Evelyn drew in a breath and lifted the tray with steady hands, each step toward the grand hall echoing with the soft click of her heels. The golden harp was brimming with elegance. Marbled floors, velvet drapes, tables dressed in gold. Tonight's guest list was exclusive: 30 guests, agency staff, partners, and elite clients. She had memorized every name to avoid detection. Few had seen her in person. Most only knew the framed photo of the perfect wife smiling from David's office shelf. She emerged into the soft-lit banquet hall just as the music shifted. Through the haze of low voices and clinking glasses, Evelyn spotted him, David Cooper, at the far end of the room, tall and impeccably dressed in a navy suit, drink in hand, laughing. But her smile faded. A woman was draped against him, young, luminous, eyes full of adoration. Her arms curled possessively around his neck. The crowd around them cheered, and then came a voice, a coworker's jubilant toast. "You two make such a beautiful couple. Will we be invited to the wedding?" The words struck Evelyn like a blade to the chest. Her legs faltered, her fingers tightening around the tray to steady herself. She stared at the scene before her, the carefully woven surprise unraveling in an instant. The envelope in her purse suddenly felt heavier than the tray in her hands. There, under the golden light, her husband of 10 years stood in a moment of intimacy with another woman, Eva Davidson, his young secretary. The affair was no longer a secret. It was a celebration. And 15 minutes later, David Cooper would remember this night not for triumph, nor love, nor champagne, but for the way Evelyn, radiant and unflinching in a waitress uniform, served him the truth on a silver tray. A sharp pang of anticipation tightened in Evelyn's chest as she stood cloaked in the shadows near the banquet hall's corner, watching the last of the crystal champagne flutes being lined up by the waitstaff. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the silver tray in her hand. It wasn't the pregnancy, barely 6 weeks along and not yet revealing, but a pulse of excitement that fluttered through her stomach. Tonight was the moment her life with David would change forever. She had imagined it all, how she would glide toward his table, blend in as just another masked hostess at this opulent agency masquerade, and set the champagne flute down with grace. Then she placed the envelope, simple, white, unassuming, beside his glass. Inside, a single truth, the result of her test, their child. She pictured his fingers breaking the seal, unfolding the slip of paper, his brow furrowing at first in surprise before his face would light up with joy, his eyes bright with unshed tears. She could almost feel the warmth of his embrace, the tremor in his voice as he whispered her name, perhaps even dropped to his knees in overwhelmed delight. But the click of the tall double doors snapped her out of the dream. The first guests were beginning to arrive. Evelyn melted further into the shadows, peering out from behind a decorative column laced with silk and ivy. She recognized faces from David's phone, snippets of agency dinners and team outings, filtered smiles and posed camaraderie. Michael Rogers appeared first, tall and silver-templed, the charismatic creative director whose laugh could fill a room. Beside him walked Anna Bolokin, poised and stately in her tailored graphite suit, head of marketing and a woman Evelyn had always admired from afar. The room began to buzz. Guests took their seats amid the soft chime of cutlery and the swirl of wine being poured. Evelyn cast a glance down at her own costume, tastefully understated, yet enough to disguise her identity for now. She adjusted the mask, smoothed the tray cloth, and stepped into her role. Another waitress, invisible. Then David entered. The air left her lungs. He looked every bit the man she had adored for over a decade. Tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, a steel blue tie that gleamed under the chandelier. His jaw was freshly shaven, his thick hair brushed back with elegant precision. He was, as always, composed and charming, but something about his presence felt hollow, distant. He moved through the room like a ghost wearing his own skin, nodding to colleagues and exchanging pleasantries, but his gaze kept drifting toward the entrance. He was waiting for someone. Evelyn's breath hitched, unease settling like a stone in her belly. She knew the guest list by heart. There was no one left to arrive. And then, the door opened again. A young woman entered, and with her, the air seemed to shift. She couldn't have been more than 24. Long golden hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her crimson dress clung to her with a kind of calculated elegance. Every line, every curve announcing her presence with unspoken confidence. Evelyn didn't recognize her, but the way David's face lit up, how he strode across the room with the urgency of a man finally reunited with something he longed for, told Evelyn everything she needed to know. He reached for the girl's hand, whispered something that made her laugh, a soft, melodic sound. Evelyn felt the room tilt, that spark, the one she hadn't seen in his eyes for years. Now it belonged to another. She edged closer, feigning the need to collect empty glasses. Her heart pounded like a war drum beneath the bodice of her uniform as she maneuvered near enough to catch fragments of their conversation. "Eva, I'm glad you made it," David murmured, his voice lowered to a tone Evelyn remembered from another life. The girl, Eva, beamed. "Of course, Dave, you know I wouldn't miss something this important," she replied smoothly, her voice silk over glass. Dave. Only Evelyn had ever called him that, until now. He escorted Eva to his table, pulling out her chair with a reverence that sliced into Evelyn like a blade. He adjusted the back of her seat, unwrapped the shawl from her shoulders, and draped it neatly across the chair behind her. Small gestures, but not meaningless ones. Intimate ones. 100 silent betrayals nestled into motion so subtle that only someone watching closely would have noticed. Evelyn did. She stood rooted, tray in hand, the champagne flutes trembling slightly as her pulse surged. Perhaps, perhaps Eva was merely a rising star, someone David had mentored, a colleague he wanted to impress. But even as she tried to persuade herself, she couldn't look away from the way they touched. Lightly, repeatedly, with a familiarity that betrayed time spent in secret corners. Eva laughed at the jokes Michael cracked. She leaned in, whispered quick quips of her own. She fit, as though she had always belonged. And David, he was glowing. She watched him pass a napkin, his fingers grazing Eva's hand. It was fleeting, unnoticed by anyone else. But to Evelyn, it was deafening. She heard it louder than any scream, felt it deeper than any wound. Time lost meaning. The party swelled around her, music, clinking glass, laughter bouncing off high ceilings. But Evelyn was elsewhere, locked in the icy grip of realization. She kept serving, kept smiling, but her soul had retreated somewhere far behind her eyes. Every time she glanced toward David's table, the knot in her chest cinched tighter. He leaned toward Eva, whispered something in her ear. She giggled, hand resting softly atop his. It was not her imagination. It was real, and it was unraveling everything. The tray trembled in Evelyn Cooper's hands as she approached the table, each step weighted with a mix of dread and hope. Her heartbeat pounded like a war drum in her chest, an erratic rhythm that threatened to shatter the fragile composure she clung to. Tucked into the pocket of her apron was an envelope, its contents life-altering, the culmination of 10 agonizing years of hope and heartbreak. Today, she would give it to him. Today, she would share the news that could have healed everything. From a distance, their silhouettes seemed innocuous, just colleagues seated close in the soft lighting of the gala, faces aglow with laughter and clinking glasses. Evelyn reminded herself of that possibility. They might simply be getting along well. Nothing more. Maybe her own fears, amplified by late nights, fraying trust, and the hormonal surges of her pregnancy, were making monsters out of shadows. But then, just as she reached the edge of their table, their voices cut through the din and pierced her like splinters of ice. "David, when will you file for divorce?" asked Eva Davidson, her tone flat and impatient, as if she were discussing the weather. Evelyn froze mid-step, the tray tilting in her grasp, her breath caught in her throat. "Soon, darling. I just need to choose the right moment," David Cooper replied casually, his voice soaked in familiar warmth. But not for her. He called her darling. Evelyn's knees threatened to buckle. "The contract with my parents has to be signed before the end of next month," Eva pressed, her voice firm. "They want to be certain you're free of any marital obligations." "The documents are ready, David. All that's left is to serve them to your wife." David sighed. "I know. It'll be done on time, trust me." Contract, divorce, the words swam in Evelyn's ears like echoes from a nightmare. Her vision blurred, but she stood rooted to the spot, unable to move. "I'm just worried," Eva murmured, then gently rested her hand on David's neck. A caress so intimate, so entitled, it shattered any lingering doubt. David didn't recoil. Instead, he reached up and clasped her fingers. "Your parents are right," he said quietly. "The past needs to be closed before the future can begin. It's just not easy, not after 10 years of marriage." 10 years, Evelyn could hear the irony slicing through that number like a blade. Then came the final blow. Michael Rogers, ever boisterous, strolled up with a half-empty glass of champagne and a grin that bordered on foolish. "My friends," he declared with theatrical flair, lifting his glass high. "Let's toast to our boss and his radiant companion." Around the table, glasses rose in response. The laughter was sharp, glinting like shards of glass. "David, Eva, you two are like something out of a magazine. Honestly. So when's the wedding?" Wedding. The word slammed into Evelyn with the force of a car crash. Her gaze shot to David. He smiled, sheepishly, yes, but didn't deny it. And Eva giggled, sliding her arm around his shoulders, claiming him with casual familiarity. "Michael, you've had too much to drink." David laughed, but he didn't shrug Eva off. Michael just waved it off. Oh, come on. Everyone at the agency's talking about you two. You're a beautiful couple. What's there to hide? 2 meters away stood Evelyn, unnoticed, invisible. The tray shook violently in her hands, glasses rattling like bones. The envelope in her pocket might as well have been a branding iron, searing her skin. Everyone knew. Her heart screamed the words. Everyone knew, except her. 10 years of fertility treatments, heartbreak, and persistent faith that love, their love, would triumph over every disappointment. And all the while, David had been turning to someone else, someone younger, someone fertile, someone who hadn't suffered through miscarriages and the silence of sterile clinics, someone who hadn't clung to hope while their marriage quietly died. Evelyn turned on trembling legs and strode toward the exit, tunnel vision guiding her through the glittering crowd. She dropped the tray onto the nearest table, not registering the startled glances from the waitstaff. She pushed through the service corridor and leaned against the cool concrete wall. Only then did she breathe, and even that came in ragged, broken fragments. No tears came, just a profound, bottomless void. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the envelope. A simple, innocuous thing. Inside it, the results of her most recent tests. The miracle they had chased for a decade. She was pregnant. Finally, blessedly, impossibly pregnant. And today, on this day of betrayal, that truth had arrived like a cruel joke from the universe. She stared at the envelope, her hand shaking. Then slowly, deliberately, she folded it in half and slipped it into her bag. David wouldn't know. Not today, maybe not ever. First, she needed to breathe again. Then she would decide what pieces of her life were still worth saving. Evelyn's spine straightened with the cold resolve of a woman on the brink of revelation. Her breath was shallow, but her mind sharp as a blade honed by betrayal. Whatever shadowy deal David had struck with that girl's parents, whatever dark bond tied their names together, it wasn't merely an office flirtation. This was deeper, strategic, ruthless. She smoothed her borrowed uniform and re-entered the hall, every movement composed, deliberate, masking the storm churning inside her. The room pulsed with laughter and clinking glasses. Corporate cheer gave cover to loosened tongues and unchecked truths. Evelyn slid through the crowd like smoke, balancing a tray with practiced grace. But her true task lay in espionage. Every laugh, every careless whisper, might be a thread in the web she needed to unravel. Her heart didn't tremble now, it waited, coiled and ready. Near a table scattered with cocktail napkins and half-finished drinks, Evelyn paused. Anna Balulkin, head of marketing, leaned in confidentially toward Elena Sterling, the sharp-tongued designer. Evelyn tilted her head as though listening for drink orders, polishing glassware she'd already cleaned. "I feel sorry for her," Anna murmured, eyes scanning the room with something like pity. "Who?" Elena asked, arching a brow. "David's wife," Anna said flatly. "She hasn't a clue what's coming." Evelyn's hand tightened slightly on the cloth. Her eyes didn't move, but her pulse did. Lena scoffed, lowering her voice. "Are you serious? It's obvious to anyone with eyes. David's obsessed. That Davidson girl has him wrapped around her little finger." Davidson, a name now carved into Evelyn's memory. Eva Davidson. She mouthed it silently. A name dressed in silk and entitlement. A name with a pedigree. "They've been married 10 years, Anna added softly, trying for a child that whole time, or so I heard. Difficulties with conception." And then Eva arrived, young, radiant, and most dangerously connected. A perfect storm. "Do you think he'll resist her?" Elena asked, her voice tinged with cynicism. "She's from money. Serious money. Her father's William Davidson. He owns the Golden Mile shopping centers. The man's a tycoon. And her mother, Patricia Davidson? She runs Elite, the modeling agency. Their family has influence in every corner of this city." Evelyn's blood iced over. So it wasn't just about lust or infatuation. It was power, status, the doors that could open when you stood next to someone like Eva Davidson. "He's dreamed of breaking into their world for years," Anna said. "I think he'd trade everything for a seat at their table." A tremor rippled through Evelyn's core, but she didn't flinch. The waitress mask held. "Nothing's been announced yet," Elena added cautiously, "but he's practically parading the girl around. I've heard the Davidsons are meticulous about appearances. They wouldn't tolerate scandal." Poor woman, Elena sighed, her voice softening. She doesn't know what's coming. Life is cruel, Anna replied, folding her hands, especially for women our age. Men, the moment they reach a peak, start hunting something fresher. Evelyn moved away from their table with quiet steps, each one echoing with rage and clarity. The outlines of her husband's betrayal had begun to sharpen, but she needed more. She needed to see the full depth of his deception, his intentions, his strategy, and most of all, that mysterious contract whispered earlier. She drifted toward another table, this one surrounded by the agency's finance team. The air here was thicker, serious, laced with murmurs about growth, projections, and future ventures. He's planning a branch in New York, said Igor Tarasov, adjusting his cufflink. Needs a big investor, though, replied Peter Kondrov. Agency's doing well, but not that well. That's why he's with Davidson's daughter, Igor said matter-of-factly. Her father's wallet could bankroll an entire media empire. Word is the old man has got plans. TV, digital, the works. Needs someone savvy to run the advertising side. Evelyn's knuckles whitened. So it was all calculated. David wasn't just betraying her. He was leveraging his affair for access to power, using Eva like a golden bridge to empire. Think he'll marry her? Peter asked. He has to, Igor replied. William Davidson won't invest in a man tangled in scandal. He values clean slates and moral optics. If David wants in, he'll have to get out of his marriage. And the wife? He'll divorce her. No kids. Should be simple. I heard he's already talked to attorneys. Amicable split. No fuss. No children. Evelyn's lips pressed tightly together. If only they knew. If only they saw the folded paper nestled deep in her handbag. A pregnancy test, signed and certified. Positive. A surge of fury bloomed in her chest. Not only had David betrayed her in body and trust, he was coldly plotting her erasure. 10 years of shared dreams, of late nights crying over negative results, of endless tests and whispered hope, reduced to a roadblock in his climb to power. She glanced at her watch. 8:30. The crowd had begun to thin. Soon David and Eva would leave, together no doubt their eyes on champagne futures and multi-million-dollar empires. But Evelyn? She stepped away from the tables, her reflection catching in the mirror across the room. She walked toward it slowly, not to fix her hair, not to cry, but to look herself in the eye and decide who she would become next. Her reflection stared back with deceptive composure, but inside Evelyn Cooper was a tempest. Every breath sharp, every heartbeat laced with betrayal. Beneath the fluorescent lights of the restaurant's ladies' room, she clutched the porcelain sink, cold beneath her fingers, and wrestled with the chaos in her chest. Pretend ignorance and wait for David to reveal his deceit? Or confront the lie with unflinching resolve? She drew her phone from her handbag, her fingers trembling slightly as she began to dig through the digital shadows of the Davidson dynasty. If she was to stand her ground, she needed to know precisely whom she was up against. William Davidson, 58, real estate magnate, owner of the sprawling Golden Mile shopping chain. Patricia Davidson, 54, founder and iron-fisted director of elite modeling agency. Eva Davidson, 24, the only daughter, Columbia Business School graduate, a sign of power, charm, and connections across boardrooms, backrooms, and red carpets alike. For a man like David, hungry, ambitious, addicted to ascendancy, it was the perfect ladder to scale the next tier of prestige. Her thumb halted as she stumbled upon a recent article in a glossy business journal. Davidson eyes expansion, seeks strategic partner for major marketing conglomerate. The line sang like a warning bell. William Davidson wasn't just dabbling, he was searching for an anchor in advertising. David hadn't met Eva by coincidence. No, this had been orchestrated, calculated. A seduction not just of a woman, but of her lineage, her father, his empire, his future. With a quiet exhale, Evelyn slipped the phone back into her purse and stepped into the hallway. The atmosphere had shifted, muted conversations, half-empty tables, servers clearing champagne flutes. A significant number of guests had already departed, and there they were. David stood beside Eva, draping a cashmere wrap over her shoulders with a tenderness that once belonged to Evelyn. They leaned close, words slipping between them like silk. Shall we go to my place? Eva's voice was low, conspiratorial. Not tonight, darling. My wife will be waiting. No need to spark suspicion before the time is right. Tomorrow, then? Definitely. I need to discuss the meeting with your parents. And they glided toward the exit, pausing as David offered firm, professional handshakes to colleagues. Eva followed, radiant and sweet, the flawless accessory. Michael Rogers' careless words echoed in Evelyn's memory. The perfect couple. Evelyn waited a moment longer, ensuring their car had disappeared into the night, before making her exit. Igor Peterson, ever the gentleman, met her near the door. How did your surprise go? He asked with a warm, knowing smile. Better than I expected, she replied softly. And it was true. She had unearthed far more than she'd ever feared. Back home, Evelyn peeled away the disguise, wig, waitress uniform, and stepped into the scalding stream of the shower. The heat seared her skin, but not her soul. The ache inside remained, heavy, raw, alive. Wrapped in soft home clothes, she sat at the kitchen table, the air thick with unspoken truths. David would arrive any minute. She needed clarity, control. To act now would be to lose the element of surprise. And so she would wait, play the part, just as he did. She pulled an envelope from her bag and opened it again, although she had memorized every word. Pregnancy, 4 weeks, a child. After 10 years of waiting. A miracle forged at the very moment their marriage fractured. David didn't know. And if he did, would it matter? Would a child outweigh ambition? Would fatherhood triumph over hunger for status and wealth? She doubted it. And yet something fragile and luminous stirred within her. Hope, perhaps. She placed the envelope in the far drawer, burying it for now. No one would know, not yet. She needed time to chart her course through the storm. At 10 o'clock sharp, the front door clicked open. Hi, darling, David said, stepping into the kitchen, his face aglow with forced ease. He looked tired but satisfied. How are things? What did you do this evening? Read, watch some TV, she said evenly, her voice calm. The corporate party? Went well. The team's happy. So are the partners. I think we'll land some exciting new campaigns soon. He spoke as though nothing had changed, but Evelyn could smell it. Perfume, unfamiliar and cloying, clinging to his collar. He wouldn't meet her eyes. That's good, she murmured. Want anything? No thanks, I'm exhausted. Going to bed. He kissed her cheek, a brief, automatic gesture, and disappeared down the hall. Evelyn remained seated in silence, staring at the place where he had stood. How seamless the performance. How effortless the deceit. An hour ago, he was whispering promises to another woman, plotting a future that excluded his wife entirely. She heard the water running. David was in the shower, scrubbing away the scent of betrayal. He was careful, so careful. Half an hour later, she too went to bed. David lay turned away, feigning sleep. Once, he would have embraced her, shared the details of his night. Now he retreated behind silence. Evelyn lay beside him, motionless. The distance between their bodies more vast than miles. In the dark, she stared at the ceiling. The cracks in their marriage were no longer hairline. They were chasms. When had he stopped loving her? When did ambition eclipse affection? Or had love vanished long ago, quietly, without fanfare, and she simply hadn't wanted to see it? He slept, peacefully, or pretending to. The soft rhythm of David's breathing beside her felt almost cruel in its calm. Evelyn lay motionless in the dark, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling as if it held answers to questions she hadn't yet dared to ask. Her mind reeled with thoughts, images, and half-spoken words from the evening's strained dinner conversation. Sleep evaded her, taunting her with its silence. A fog of betrayal clung to her skin like cold mist, seeping into her bones. Only recently she had still clung to illusions. She had told herself that David's aloofness was the result of the failed IVF attempts, their last thread of hope unraveling into sterile disappointment. His distant eyes, his rushed mornings, his late returns. All of it had been wrapped in a cocoon of work stress, she had believed. But tonight the curtain had fallen. The truth stood bare and brutal. He wasn't just weary, he was preparing for a life without her, and she was no longer alone. Within her, life stirred, silent and fragile, but real, a child. Her child, their child. She turned her face away from David's silhouette and closed her eyes. You have rights, Evelyn. You have dignity. And now you have someone to protect. She repeated the thought like a vow, anchoring herself to it. But vows without caution were useless. She would need precision, strategy, no missteps. Morning came too swiftly. David, all briefcase and clone, drained his coffee in 2 gulps. Big meeting, he muttered, already halfway out the door. Evelyn watched him as she always did. Same smile, same goodbye kiss on the cheek. But beneath the practiced motions, everything had changed. The ritual felt hollow, like a scene rehearsed for an audience that had long since left. As the door clicked shut, she turned toward the glow of the computer screen with a new purpose hardening in her chest. If she wanted to protect herself, she needed clarity. And clarity would begin with the Davidsons. William Davidson, tycoon, head of the Golden Mile Empire, 12 luxurious shopping centers spanning the nation, billions in assets. His name surfaced in every corner of the financial press. His wife, Patricia, an icon in elite modeling circles, helmed an agency that courted global fashion powerhouses. A glamorous family cloaked in wealth, connections, and social dominance. But Evelyn wasn't looking for glamour. She was looking for cracks. One article stood out. William Davidson was diversifying, looking to move into the media sector. He wanted his own advertising empire, one that could serve not just his chain of malls, but external clients as well. For that, he needed someone embedded in the world of marketing, someone with credentials, experience, and a polished network, someone like David Cooper. Evelyn's stomach clenched. It wasn't just about Eva. The secretary was nothing more than a stepping stone. David had orchestrated his betrayal with cold ambition. Eva was young, yes, but more crucially, she was William Davidson's daughter. He's not leaving me for love. He's leaving me for power. Click by click, she delved into the financial data of Prestige Agency. David had always been dismissive of her interest in the company's finances. Too dry for you, he used to joke. But Evelyn had an economics degree and a quiet talent for reading numbers like narratives. The agency, while stable, lacked the financial muscle to grow. David had taken out several loans, clearly intended to fund expansion, but the sums fell short of the bold vision he liked to flaunt. Then she found it, a trail of transactions, small, obscured, and cleverly buried in auxiliary reports. Money flowed in and out, yet avoided the agency's official ledgers. She copied the files, saving each piece like a shard of glass. Someday they might become weapons. By lunchtime, she had the entire picture laid bare. David planned to divorce her, marry Eva, and leverage that alliance to become William Davidson's business partner. But the whole plan hinged on the Davidsons' approval, their trust, their ignorance. What if I dismantled that illusion? What if they knew who he really was? She didn't have to confront him. Not yet. She could shift the board without ever showing her hand. But first, she needed to see them, gauge them. And she couldn't do that as David's wife, a discarded character in his new play. She had to be someone else. Someone sharp, independent, untethered. She chose a tailored navy blue suit and crisp white blouse. Her makeup was flawless, her posture poised. Evelyn Cooper had vanished. Ellen Roman, cosmetics representative, stood in her place. The elite modeling agency towered in a gleaming building nestled in the heart of the city's business district. Inside, the air smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. Tall, lithe models floated through the halls like swans. Assistants whispered over contract folders. Cameras clicked in nearby studios. Evelyn approached the receptionist with a confident smile. Good afternoon, I'm Ellen Roman, representing Oriel Cosmetics. I'd like to speak with Mrs. Davidson about a potential partnership. The receptionist barely blinked. Mrs. Davidson is out on a shoot today, but I can schedule an appointment. Evelyn leaned in, her tone soft but firm. I understand, but this matter is time-sensitive. I'm willing to wait. An hour later, her patience was rewarded. Patricia Davidson swept into the lobby like a queen entering court. Mid-50s, impeccably elegant, with the composed aura of someone used to being admired. Every detail was calculated, from her sculpted cheekbones to the understated opulence of her designer coat. Evelyn recognized her instantly from the countless magazine features. The moment Patricia entered, the rhythm of the room shifted. Assistants straightened, models parted, and Ellen, stood ready, her plan unfolding one step at a time. Patricia Davidson's eyes, lined with years of sharp judgment and high expectations, narrowed slightly as she studied Evelyn Cooper from across the sleek glass desk. The sun filtered in through floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, casting long shadows across the polished oak floor of the director's office. Her tone was measured but cool, clipped with executive precision. "A cosmetics company is waiting for you," the administrator had murmured moments before. And now here they were, two women locked in a silent duel of intentions beneath a veneer of professional civility. Patricia folded her hands atop an elegant, leather-bound planner. "So," she began with a tone dipped in polite skepticism, "what cosmetics company has caught your interest?" Evelyn, poised and unflinching, met the challenge with a calm that masked the storm inside her. She had anticipated this moment, crafted her words carefully, and sharpened her objectives like blades. "We're launching a premium anti-aging line targeted at women over 30, she said. "We're looking for models who authentically represent that demographic for a nationwide campaign." Patricia's eyebrow arched ever so slightly, an acknowledgement of intrigue. "And your budget?" Evelyn named a figure neither modest nor outrageous, just enough to provoke interest while suggesting capability. Patricia gave a slight nod. For the next 30 minutes, they danced the delicate waltz of corporate negotiation, campaign logistics, target markets, ethical standards, aesthetic direction. All the while, Evelyn observed Patricia like a seasoned strategist studies her opponent. The woman was intelligent, undeniably perceptive, and fiercely protective of her family's image and the prestige of her agency. She wore luxury like second skin, but it was her obsession with reputation that Evelyn found most revealing. "We maintain exceptionally high standards," Patricia said crisply. "We only collaborate with companies that mirror our values, particularly regarding integrity and image." "Absolutely," Evelyn agreed smoothly. "In fact, we've worked with several agencies, including Prestige." At that, Patricia's posture stiffened just enough to betray discomfort. "Prestige?" she repeated, her voice now guarded. "Yes, I've heard of them. The director is seeing my daughter." Evelyn tilted her head, offering an expression of polite surprise. "Really? And how do you feel about that?" Patricia's tone turned diplomatic. "We're still evaluating. Naturally, we vet anyone who hopes to be part of our family circle." The truth glinted through the cracks. Evelyn now understood the urgency behind David Cooper's push for divorce. The Davidson family wouldn't tolerate entanglements, especially ones that could tarnish their legacy. "You're absolutely right," Evelyn said. "Reputation is the backbone of any successful enterprise." As the meeting drew to a close, contact information was exchanged, and a future meeting tentatively set. Patricia walked Evelyn to the elevator with the courtesy of someone still calculating their guest's worth. Evelyn paused before stepping inside. "By the way," she said casually with a pointed softness, "if you have any reservations about Prestige, it might be worth taking a closer look at their client list. Not all of their collaborations are equally commendable." Patricia turned sharply, brows knit. "What exactly are you implying?" "Oh, nothing specific," Evelyn replied, already stepping into the elevator. "Just a general observation. In our industry, it's wise to know who your partners associate with, especially when that partner is a family man eager to remake his future." The door slid shut. Patricia remained still, her mind turning. Evelyn had said nothing directly, but the seed had been planted, dark and restless. That evening, David returned home humming with satisfaction, his mood buoyant. Over dinner, he gestured animatedly, speaking of future ventures and partnerships that would redefine the agency's status. "You know, Eve," he said, his fork paused midair, "things are about to shift. I can feel it. This could take us to the next level." "In what way?" Evelyn asked gently, her voice laced with curiosity, soft, unthreatening. She played the part of the trusting wife with disarming grace. "A new opportunity," David said, "a serious one. If this works out, Prestige will be among the elite." She nodded, her smile mild and unreadable. She already knew what he refused to confess. The opportunity had a name: Eva Davidson. And it was not just a negotiation. It was an affair months in the making. Later, as David secluded himself in his study under the guise of late-night planning, Evelyn heard the hushed cadence of his voice, lowered, intimate, likely speaking to Eva. The next morning, Evelyn resumed her quiet war. Through discreet inquiries in the banking world, she confirmed that William Davidson was indeed preparing a major move into media investments. But what mattered more was how he operated. The man was legendary for his scrupulousness. Every potential partner was dissected, financially, ethically, and personally. One blemish could destroy a deal. That gave Evelyn clarity. She didn't need to fight David directly. She only had to let his true nature be seen by the right eyes. And for that, she needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable, damning. Her thoughts returned to anomalies she'd previously uncovered in agency documents. Odd entries, strange disbursements. Now, with renewed urgency, she plunged into the financial records of Prestige. For several days, she traced transaction trails like a detective mapping a conspiracy. Slowly, the patterns emerged, disturbing and precise. David had built more than an ad agency. He had fashioned a discreet laundromat for reputations. Among their clients were names linked to criminal scandals, a construction firm mired in bribery investigations, a chain of nightclubs with ties to illegal dealings, a financial group under investigation for fraud. David hadn't simply taken their business. He had polished their public image, made them palatable to the world. And if the Davidsons were to discover this, their alliance with David Cooper would shatter before it was ever cemented. Evelyn's weapon wasn't scandal, it was truth, sharpened by patience. Believe a man building an empire in advertising wouldn't scrutinize his own clientele? The crystal chandelier above shimmered faintly, catching the silent tension settling around the dinner table like a storm cloud. William Davidson leaned back into his high-backed chair, hands clasped, his gray eyes unwavering as they watched his daughter process the weight of betrayal. Eva's fingers trembled as she turned another page in the folder. Each document seemed heavier than the last. Contracts, bank transfers, internal memos with damning clarity. Her lips parted as though to speak, but no sound came out. "You're a smart girl," William continued, his voice low but firm, edged with the kind of patience only afforded to those who already know the outcome. "You understand numbers. You understand power. So ask yourself, why would someone who claims integrity consistently work with corrupt entities, even after the scandals broke into public view?" Patricia Davidson, poised in her designer evening wear, reached out and rested a manicured hand over Eva's. "Sweetheart, sometimes people present a version of themselves that's easy to fall for. I did the same once," she added, her voice softened by memory and motherly instinct. "But illusion doesn't withstand scrutiny." Across the polished mahogany table, the air was thick with something raw and unforgiving. Reality. Eva stared at her father, then back at the documents, as if hoping the ink would rearrange itself into innocence. "But he told me his clients were vetted, that everything went through compliance." William's expression didn't waver. "Our investigators found otherwise. The Alliance construction deal funneled funds through shell companies. Golden Chip Casino, blacklisted in 4 jurisdictions. Capital Plus, a textbook pyramid scheme. Your David not only knew, he helped scrub their reputations clean for profit. Unreported profit." A shudder passed through Eva. Her throat tightened. In another corner of the city, that same night, Evelyn Cooper stood at the window of her modest apartment. Rain streaked the glass, neon lights refracted through the droplets like fractured hopes. She rested a hand over her stomach, feeling the faint, fluttering movements within. Nicholas, the son of a man who had betrayed her, the man who was now unraveling before his new lover's eyes. She had expected regret, perhaps even guilt. But what filled her heart now was a quiet, unshakable strength. She had played her move carefully. The moment she had handed William Davidson those documents, she had lit a fuse beneath the grand facade David had constructed for himself. She wasn't after revenge, not entirely. She wanted the truth to surface, wanted Eva to see the man she was about to anchor her future to. William's investigation had confirmed it all. Hidden revenues, illicit affiliations, a calculated betrayal of ethics for profit. Evelyn had spent nights compiling every thread, every scrap of paper, Every whisper passed down from Igor Peterson and Anna Belulkin. She knew the stakes. The Davidians weren't easily swayed. They demanded evidence, not emotion. And now she could almost hear the conversation unfolding in the marble-clad dining room of the Davidson estate. Hear Eva's voice faltering. Hear William's cold precision as he laid bare her lover's sins. Back at the mansion, Eva finally whispered, "He said he wanted to build something clean. That prestige agency was about vision and integrity." Patricia's eyes were kind, but unflinching. "He may have meant it once, or maybe that was just what he wanted you to believe." William rose from his seat, walking to the fireplace, folder still in hand. "We cannot afford to be sentimental when our family's name is at stake. We deal in influence, Eva, and influence demands scrutiny. David Cooper is not a man we will partner with." Eva didn't cry, not yet, but the illusion cracked, loudly, mercilessly. As she sat in silence, her father's final words echoed in her mind, stark as thunder. "Sometimes the truth arrives dressed as betrayal, but it's still the truth." And Evelyn, far away, stood tall and unflinching. The storm outside might rage on, but within her a calm resolve had taken root. The first blow had landed, and the reckoning had only just begun. Tears clung to the corners of Eva's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not yet. Her lips, usually so quick with playful sarcasm or shy smiles, were now frozen in a brittle silence. William's voice, calm, clipped, undeniable, had stripped away every illusion she had wrapped around David Cooper, like silk ribbons around a gift she had so desperately wanted to believe in. "You think a man seasoned in advertising wouldn't know exactly who he's dealing with?" William's tone was not cruel, but it was merciless in its clarity. Eva swallowed, the weight of revelation settling like wet concrete in her chest. Her hands trembled faintly in her lap, fingers clutching one another as if to stop herself from unraveling completely. "All of it," William continued, his gaze fixed on his daughter, "was calculated. He knew about our family long before you met. He sought you out. Our name, our reputation, our resources. He wanted in." "He used me?" Her voice was so soft it barely rose above the air between them. "I'm afraid so," he said, the truth as unyielding as stone. "You, us, everything we built." A quiet gasp slipped from Eva's lips before she buried her face in her hands. Patricia moved without hesitation, wrapping her arms around her daughter's shoulders, holding her with a mother's fierce, trembling grace. "My darling," she whispered, stroking Eva's hair. "I know this hurts in ways you can't even name yet, but better to have your heart broken now than destroyed beyond repair later." Eva didn't resist. The sobs came freely now, quiet but ragged, each one more desperate than the last. "I loved him. I really thought we had something real, that it meant something." William's expression softened, the edge of a father's disappointment dulled by compassion. "You're still young, Eva. You've got time, more than you know. And now you understand, not every man who smiles at you deserves your trust." She raised her tear-streaked face toward him, eyes rimmed red. "What do I do now? Do I confront him?" William paused, thoughtful. The room seemed to hold its breath with him. "No, not yet. For now, carry on as if nothing's changed. We'll need time to determine the right move. As for the partnership," his jaw clenched slightly, "there will be none. But Cooper must not suspect that we've seen through him." The next morning, William Davidson summoned Samuel Foster to his study, a room built for secrets and decisive action. Foster, once a sharp-eyed agent with the FBI, now managed the complex security web surrounding the Davidson legacy. "We've got a problem," William began, handing over a thick file. Foster accepted it without a word, flipping through photos, financial statements, surveillance reports. When he spoke, his voice was cool, analytical. "This is solid, enough to indict, easily." "Which brings us to options," William said, leaning back in his chair. "Three," Foster replied. "First, go public. Press charges. He'll serve time. Second, we gut him economically. Cut his lifelines, clients, banks, credit lines, until he's in financial ruin. Third, we soften him up with economic pressure, then hit him with legal charges. That way he'll be too weak to fight back." William narrowed his eyes. And his wife, Evelyn Cooper? According to our intel, she's out of the loop, a private woman. Seems devoted to the idea of motherhood. No sign she's involved in any of his business. Good, William said with a nod. Then we proceed with option 3, quietly. I don't want a single whisper of this in the press. I'll start with the Banks and Tax Bureau, Foster assured. Within a few weeks, Cooper will feel the walls closing in. And Eva? She's still seeing him. Let her. The longer he believes he's still fooling us, the more vulnerable he becomes. William gave a curt nod. Proceed. But the machine didn't roar to life overnight. Foster's plan, intricate and multi-layered, required weeks of silent maneuvering. Connections in banking, corporate law, and federal departments had to be activated with the subtlety of a chess master, each move setting the trap tighter. Meanwhile, David Cooper carried on, oblivious to the tightening noose. He smiled, schemed, and spun dreams of power. At the same time, a different kind of performance unfolded quietly in his own home. It had been a month since Evelyn had learned the truth. A month since the stillness in their bedroom became more than physical distance. A month since she had looked at her husband and no longer asked why, because she already knew. Her face, calm and composed, became a mask of domestic contentment. She laughed at the right moments, nodded through his excuse about long meetings and weekend flights. She didn't press or crun. He mistook her silence for passivity. He had no idea she was pregnant. The child she carried, finally, after so many years of heartbreak, was the one secret she guarded from him. She would tell him when her body could no longer hide it, not before. At her checkup, Dr. Arnold Sorensen smiled warmly as Evelyn stepped into the clinic's gentle light. His eyes lit up with something that went beyond professional regard. You look radiant, Mrs. Cooper, he said, examining her chart. Pregnancy suits you. Thank you, doctor, Evelyn replied softly. For the first time in years, I feel whole. And your husband? He asked, his tone casual, but the question hung in the air like smoke. He's busy, she said, eyes glancing away. Arnold didn't pry. His gaze lingered, thoughtful. If you ever need more than medical advice, I hope you'll let me know. I'm here. Evelyn met his eyes for a beat too long. Gratitude swelled in her chest, not just for his kindness, but for the way he saw her. The real her, not the forgotten wife, not the pawn in a man's ambition. Just Evelyn. Back at Prestige Agency, cracks began to appear in David's carefully polished world. The IRS launched an audit without warning. 2 major accounts abruptly pulled out. Banks demanded early loan repayments without explanation. Panic sparked behind his eyes, though he tried to bury it beneath bravado. It's just a downturn, he told Eva during a stolen lunch. Once your father signs the contract, all this disappears. But Eva didn't answer right away. She was watching him now, not with affection, but with sharp, deliberate clarity, like someone who has finally opened her eyes and doesn't like what she sees. The walls were closing in, but David Cooper still thought he was in control. Her voice was steady, but inside, Evelyn's heart was a battlefield of loyalty and disillusion. She played the part of a devoted lover with practiced ease, the smile on her lips masking a storm she couldn't quiet. She knew what David was, what he had done, yet some fragile remnant of affection clung to her, like a thread that refused to break. Dave, she asked, her voice soft but edged with expectation. When are you going to meet my parents? David didn't falter. Soon, darling, he replied with a reassuring smile. Your father's an extraordinarily busy man, but he'll make time. He must for something this important. But the truth was less comforting. David had, in fact, tried several times to arrange that meeting, only to be politely but persistently evaded. William Davidson had a knack for avoiding people he found unworthy of his attention. 6 weeks had passed since that glitzy corporate soiree, and Evelyn had nearly forgotten about the evasions, until an unexpected call rattled her. The voice on the other end was male, unfamiliar, and polite to the point of precision. He introduced himself as Mr. Davidson's assistant. Mr. Davidson would like to speak with you in person, he said. It's a matter of mutual interest. Evelyn's heart skipped. Mutual interest? She agreed to the meeting, puzzled but curious, and was instructed to come to a discreet cafe nestled in the city center. She arrived at the exact minute, composure draped across her like a veil. In the corner, away from the clatter and chatter of midday patrons, sat William Davidson. He stood the moment he saw her, composed in his elegant suit, his gaze unreadable. "Evelyn Cooper," he greeted calmly. "Thank you for coming." They took their seats, the world around them seeming to blur into static. Evelyn straightened. "I'll admit I'm not sure what there is to discuss. About your daughter and my husband?" "Indeed," William said evenly. "About the truth we both already know." Evelyn froze, her breath hitched. "You knew who I was?" "I suspected from the moment you called yourself Ellen Roman," he said. "The tip about Prestige's financial discrepancies came from you, didn't it?" There was no use denying it. Evelyn gave a faint nod, shoulders drawn back, bracing for judgment. But William's expression softened. "Don't worry, I'm not here to reproach you. Quite the opposite. I owe you my thanks. Because of your actions, we were able to uncover the truth." She searched his face. "How did you find me out?" "I have good people," he replied. "Analysts who followed the trail you left. And honestly, not many would have access to those particular financial records." He ordered coffee for himself and a jasmine tea for her, the warmth of his manner starkly contrasting with the cold precision of his words. "I'd like to propose a collaboration." "What kind of collaboration?" He leaned in. "We've both suffered at the hands of David Cooper. He used my daughter. He planned to manipulate our family for power and profit. And he betrayed you, violated your trust, dismantled your marriage. I believe our interests align." Evelyn studied him carefully. "Go on." "You have access to internal knowledge, details that could expose him further. I have resources, people, reach. Together, we can dismantle everything he's built." "Dismantle?" she echoed Defoe. "Yes," William said, his voice low and deliberate. "Burn his empire to the ground. Strip him of his reputation, his influence. Make sure he can never again deceive another woman or pull the strings of criminal dealings." Evelyn's breath caught. This wasn't petty revenge. This was war. "And what do I gain?" He named a sum that made her pulse quicken. It was more than compensation, it was liberation. A future she hadn't dared imagine. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "It's not just about Eva." He gave a dry smile. "This isn't about money, it's about honor. No one manipulates my family and walks away. And I have no tolerance for men who betray their wives." Evelyn looked down at her tea, then met his eyes with fierce clarity. "I have one condition." "What is it?" "I don't just want him ruined financially, I want him behind bars, for everything. I want him to answer to the law." William's eyes gleamed. "That can be arranged. We have allies in law enforcement. We'll build a case solid enough to hold in court." She hesitated, then said the final truth. "I'm pregnant. It's his child. I want security, not just for me, but for my baby." "You have my word," William said. "Your child will lack for nothing." Evelyn extended her hand. He took it. The deal was struck. Samuel Foster, a man who rarely spoke in anything less than bullet points, was assigned to develop the operational plan. The strategy was meticulous. First, economic pressure, then legal entanglement. Finally, public ruin. Stage one had already begun. Audits triggered, clients quietly steered away, lines of credit yanked without warning. Now came stage two, gather hard evidence. Foster handed Evelyn a discreet recording device. "Your job is to get him talking," he said. "Not too direct. Make it feel like casual curiosity. Don't overplay your part." But extracting confessions from David wasn't easy. He had grown secretive, tense, almost paranoid under the mounting pressure. At home, he spoke little of work. The stress carved new shadows beneath his eyes. One night, while pouring himself a whiskey with shaking hands, David paused mid-sip. "Eve, do you ever get the feeling someone's watching us?" She blinked. "Watching? What do you mean?" "I don't know," he muttered, stepping toward the window. "Things at the agency, it's like someone's out to sabotage us. Every move we make, something pushes back. Maybe it's just a streak of bad luck. I don't believe in coincidence, not in business." He pulled the curtain aside, his eyes scanning the street below. "And I've seen the same black sedan parked in our lot more than once." Evelyn swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. Did he suspect? "You're exhausted," she said, carefully wrapping concern in her voice. "You're working too much." "Maybe, Diane," he admitted. "But if anything strange happens, promise me you'll tell me." She nodded. Meanwhile, the noose tightened. The tax audit uncovered irregularities too significant to ignore. Banks demanded early repayment. Major accounts severed ties overnight. David tried to stop the bleeding, to salvage what remained of AI's crumbling tower. But the collapse had already begun. And Evelyn, once his quiet shadow, was no longer the woman he thought he knew. David Cooper gripped the edge of the conference table, his knuckles white, the air around him growing heavier with every passing second. "Darling, we need to accelerate the meeting with your parents," he muttered, his voice taut with urgency as he looked across the polished surface at Eva Davidson. "Things are spiraling fast." Eva tilted her head, her expression an elegant mask of concern. "I understand, Dave. But my father's schedule is packed," he said. "Maybe in a few weeks." David's jaw clenched. He raked his hand through his hair, a gesture betraying the panic simmering beneath his carefully groomed exterior. "A few weeks?" His voice cracked. "By then there might not be an agency left." Eva blinked, widening her eyes just enough to simulate fear. "What are you saying?" "It's worse than I thought," he admitted, staring past her as if hoping the wall would offer a solution. "We're bleeding money. Bankruptcy's a real possibility now." "But what about our plans?" Eva whispered, her voice laced with trembling innocence. "The partnership with my father?" "That's exactly why this meeting is crucial," David replied, his tone desperate now. "Only his capital injection can stop the collapse." That very night, in the shadowed warmth of her father's study, Eva recounted every word. William Davidson, seated beneath a painting of seascapes and ambition, nodded with calculated satisfaction. "Excellent. Cooper's unraveling. Initiate the next phase." And so it came to pass. A mere 3 months after the glittering corporate gala that once showcased David's dominance, his empire crumbled to dust. The prestige agency, once a monument to his ambition, was declared insolvent. Bailiffs swarmed like vultures, seizing every asset. The once glossy accounts were frozen solid. Yet the financial ruin was only the beginning. Legal retribution followed swiftly. Allegations of tax evasion and money laundering surfaced like buried corpses. One grim evening, David stumbled into his apartment, his face pale, his movements sluggish, as if the weight of the world had latched onto his shoulders. "Eve, we're in deep trouble," he croaked, dropping heavily into a chair. Evelyn Cooper turned from the window, her expression carefully composed. "What happened?" "They've charged me, tax fraud. I'm expected at the investigation office again tomorrow." Feigning alarm, Evelyn approached. "But you're innocent, David." "Of course I am," he snapped, then softened. "But they claim to have evidence, documents." "What kind of documents?" "I don't know," he said bitterly. "They won't show them. The investigator just said it'll all come out in due time." Rising abruptly, David began to pace, a caged man in the ruins of his own making. "Someone betrayed me, Eve. Someone inside the agency had access to sensitive records. They handed it over." Evelyn's heart pounded, but her voice was measured. "You think it's one of your employees?" "I don't see any other explanation," he muttered. That night, sleep eluded David. He lay beside Evelyn, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the specter of what he once had. Just months earlier, he'd envisioned glory, a gleaming future, arm in arm with the Davidson empire. Now all he could see was a prison cell. And Eva, his once devoted confidant, was gone. She had vanished the moment the first cracks appeared. No return calls, no explanations. A new number. William Davidson's office issued a cold, rehearsed reply. Mr. Davidson was unavailable. Used, abandoned, discarded like a blunted tool. The following morning, law enforcement returned, not with questions, but with handcuffs. David Cooper was arrested on multiple charges, escorted into the waiting vehicle under the eyes of neighbors and ghosts of his former life. Evelyn stood at the window, watching as the car turned the corner and disappeared. The silence that followed was not empty, it was liberating. 10 years of marriage had concluded with no tears, no ache, just an even, echoing calm. David had earned this ending. She picked up her phone and dialed a number saved long ago. "It's over," she said simply. "Yes," William Davidson replied. "We've been monitoring. Cooper will serve at least 7, maybe 8 years. And now, she asked. Now, he said, your new life begins. The funds are in your account. The divorce papers are with my lawyers. Once he signs them from prison, you'll be free. Her hand drifted to her abdomen, her pregnancy unmistakably visible now. Thank you, she whispered. No, William answered with rare sincerity. Thank you. You helped protect our family. And Eva, she asked. She's devastated, but she's young, she'll recover, and she's learned a valuable lesson. After the call, Evelyn moved through the apartment like a visitor. The walls whispered of betrayals, the furniture echoed hollow promises. She began to pack. 2 weeks later, she left behind that life of glass, smiles, and poison kisses. She settled into a modest home on the edge of town. Quiet, sun-drenched, hers. The divorce was swift. David, broken and cornered, signed everything without protest. She inherited a sliver of what once was, the rest consumed by the state. But she didn't care. What mattered was her freedom. The pregnancy progressed peacefully until the 7th month, when complications surfaced. The doctor insisted on immediate hospitalization. Dr. Arnold Sorensen took her under his personal care. He visited daily, oversaw every scan, offered not just medical guidance, but genuine comfort. Doctor, you're giving me too much attention, Evelyn said one morning, smiling faintly. You must have other patients. I do, Arnold replied gently, but none of them stir something in me the way you do. The words hung in the air, heavy as truth. Evelyn met his eyes and knew they weren't spoken in haste. Evelyn, he continued, his voice low, almost reverent. I didn't plan to say this. I know you're going through a storm. You need support, not more weight, but I can't pretend anymore. He sat quietly by her bedside, the lamplight casting a soft glow across her pale cheeks. His voice, though low, trembled with a quiet resolve. Over the years, Evelyn, you've become someone deeply important to me. I've watched you endure heartbreak, betrayal, and loneliness, and yet you've never once faltered. Your strength humbles me. Your kindness, your grace, they've stayed with me. Evelyn turned her face slightly, her eyes heavy with a mix of confusion and disbelief. Dr. Sorensen, she whispered, her voice brittle from the weight of unspoken pain. I'm freshly divorced. I'm carrying the child of a man who lied to me, discarded me. Why would you ever want to be entangled in all that? Arnold met her gaze with unflinching tenderness. Because I love you, he said simply, as if that truth had always lived inside him. And if you'll let me, I want to stay near you and the baby. Both of you matter to me. She didn't answer right away. Silence fell between them, deep and still. After David's deceit, after the hollow promises and calculated smiles, Arnold's unadorned honesty felt like stepping into sunlight after a long storm. It startled her. It warmed her. It hurt. I need time to think, she murmured. Of course, Arnold replied gently. I'm not going anywhere. But as the days passed, Evelyn didn't need long. Arnold didn't crowd her with declarations or demands. He simply showed up. He brought her tea when her hands shook too much to hold the kettle. He was there in the doctor's office when anxiety crept into her bones. He listened when she spiraled, when the shadows of her past tried to pull her under. He was present, not as a hero, but as a man who chose every day to care. A week later, sitting together beneath a blooming dogwood tree outside the clinic, she finally said, All right, let's try. But gently, Arnold. I have too many wounds still bleeding. His answer was a smile, soft but steady. At your pace. Always. When the time came, Nicholas entered the world strong-lunged and alert. Evelyn clutched Arnold's hand through every breath and cry. He was the first to hold the boy, arms trembling with awe. He's perfect, he whispered, pressing a kiss to the baby's crown. A real champion. Tears shimmered in Evelyn's eyes. Thank you for everything. But Arnold shook his head, still gazing at the newborn. No, thank you for letting me be here. The weeks that followed were tender and raw. Sleepless nights, new rhythms. Evelyn learning to mother. Arnold, though not Nicholas's biological father, embraced the role without question. Diapers, midnight feedings, lullabies sung off key. Love grew in those quiet hours, fierce and real. 6 months later, Arnold knelt before her, not with grand fanfare, but with reverence. "Evelyn," he said, holding her gaze, "I want us to be a family. Truly. You, me, and Nicholas. I want to give him my name, if you'll let me. I want to be his father in every way but blood." She didn't hesitate. She knew now. Arnold had been the answer she never dared to seek. The man her heart had waited for in silence. Their wedding was simple, intimate, just a gathering of those who had stood by them through storm and struggle. Afterward, Arnold formally adopted Nicholas. The boy became Nicholas Sorensen, his father's son in name, love, and devotion. 2 years later, Evelyn gave birth to a daughter they named Anna. With her arrival, the circle felt whole. The house rang with laughter, soft music, the clatter of tiny feet across wooden floors. At last, Evelyn was no longer surviving. She was living. Meanwhile, far away, David Cooper sat behind bars in a cell lined with regrets. 4 years. That was the sentence. The first months dragged like centuries, from boardroom to prison block, from tailored suits to gray uniforms. The fall had been brutal. His fellow inmates eyed him with distrust, this smooth-talking man from a world they'd never known. He learned quickly to keep his head down, to listen more than speak, to endure. But solitude forced reflection. David thought long and hard about the choices that brought him here. The endless chase for wealth, prestige, power. How he'd placed those things above love, integrity, family. He remembered Evelyn's face the night she found out. How her eyes didn't fill with rage, but with something far worse. Disappointment. No letters came. Evelyn had vanished from his life like a ghost. His lawyer informed him of the divorce, the division of assets. What assets? David had laughed bitterly. The government had seized everything. His empire reduced to rubble. But the question that gnawed at him day and night wasn't about money. It was betrayal. Who had exposed him? Who had compiled such a meticulous dossier of his misdeeds? His mind kept circling back to the Davidsons. But how would they have accessed internal documents? The mystery remained unsolved, a slow-burning ache in the dark. 3 years into his sentence, David was released early on good behavior. He emerged older, leaner, quieter. Prison had stripped him of arrogance and taught him humility. He stepped out into a world that no longer had a place for him. His agency was dissolved, his name tarnished. He had become, in every sense, a relic. With nothing left, David sold the last of his possessions and purchased a one-way ticket to a forgotten town 1,000 miles from everything he had once called home. There, anonymity embraced him like a fog. He found work at a factory, repairing machines, skills he'd learned in college, long before suits and skyscrapers consumed him. The days were long, the pay meager, the room he rented damp and cold. But the silence gave him space to grieve, to grow. He didn't drink, didn't gamble, walked to the library, read old books. Sometimes in the dead of night, he would write letters he never sent, letters to Evelyn. Page after page of apologies, memories, quiet questions. He never signed them, never mailed them. But the act of writing soothed something in him. And slowly in that strange new town with its narrow streets and distant hills, David Cooper began, tentatively, haltingly, to become someone else, someone better. The scent of spring clung softly to the breeze, brushing Evelyn Cooper's cheek as she stepped out of the hotel lobby, her suitcase already tucked away in the car. The conference had wrapped ahead of schedule, leaving her with hours to spare in a city she had not walked through in half a decade. The city where once she had imagined her life unfolding like a sunlit novel, until betrayal rewrote the ending. She hadn't planned it. She told herself it was just a drive to kill time. But her hands found the old route without hesitation, and before she realized it, Evelyn was parked in front of the apartment she and David had shared for 10 turbulent years. The building had not changed. Even the cracks on the stucco facade were the same, like scars left untouched by time. She stood there for a long while, hands clasped loosely before her, gazing at the entrance. The memories that stirred weren't bitter, they were warm, sun-flecked, painfully sincere. Laughter in the kitchen, late-night whispers in bed, his hand cradling hers the day they signed the lease. They were real once, that much was undeniable. And that truth made David's betrayal all the more tragic. Evelyn turned back to her car, but the past wasn't finished with her yet. There across the street stood a figure at the bus stop, stooped slightly, thinner than she remembered, with silver threaded through once coal-black hair. David. He had changed in all the ways a man does when time and remorse collide. The confident stride, once bordering on arrogance, had softened into something cautious, almost unsure. His clothes hung looser, his face more drawn, but it was his eyes that struck her. When he saw her and their gazes locked, Evelyn glimpsed something buried beneath the years. Surprise, unmistakable shame, and yes, regret. David took a hesitant step forward, as if his heart commanded movement before his mind could restrain it. But he stopped. A bus hissed up beside him, doors yawning open. He glanced at her once more, eyes lingering with quiet desperation, then boarded without a word. She stood there, unmoving, until the bus turned the corner and vanished. Only then did Evelyn exhale, and in that exhale was a truth she hadn't expected. She felt no hatred, no fury, just a deep, echoing sorrow for what might have been, if only he had chosen truth instead of lies, loyalty instead of seduction. The brief encounter shook David in ways he could not articulate. That night, sleep eluded him. Alone in his modest flat in a quiet provincial town, he lay staring at the ceiling, haunted by the image of Evelyn. Elegant, self-possessed, unmistakably loved. It was then he understood what he had destroyed. Not just a marriage, but the one true, unwavering affection he had ever been given. Evelyn's happiness bore no traces of bitterness. It was serene, full. She had found what he had squandered. But the meeting, however painful, was also a reckoning. David woke the next morning with a clarity that pierced his chest like cold water. Regret could no longer be his anchor. It was time to live, not as a man chasing ambition or power, but as someone quietly rebuilding. Months later, David met Anna Mitchell, a gentle schoolteacher with a calm strength and a teenage daughter, Katie, still navigating the sharp edges of grief. Anna was not intrigued by the ruins of his past. She saw only the man before her, helpful, patient, unexpectedly kind. David never shared the full history. He told her he had once been a businessman who lost everything, including his marriage, during the financial crash. Anna didn't probe. She judged by the kindness in his actions, not the shadows behind his silence. Their wedding, held a year later, was quiet. No guests, no speeches, just two people choosing each other. David became Katie's stepfather, guiding her with a care and gentleness he never knew he possessed. He fixed leaky faucets, taught her algebra, cooked dinner when Anna worked late. It was unremarkable, perhaps, but it was real and redemptive. With each passing about, the old wounds closed. Not erased, but healed into something almost beautiful, a testament to the man he was becoming. Meanwhile, Evelyn's life blossomed into something radiant. Arnold Sorensen, now her husband, proved to be the kind of father one only hopes for. Loving Nicholas, her son with David, as wholly and naturally as his own daughter, Anna. Nicholas, bright and sensitive, bore his mother's eyes and sometimes his biological father's stubbornness. Yet he called Arnold Dad with unwavering certainty, never questioning what had been. Evelyn rarely thought of David anymore, and when she did, it was not with longing or blame, just a quiet acknowledgement of the past, especially when Nicholas laughed a certain way or stared pensively out a window. She had long since made peace with her history. Elsewhere, the Davidson family found their own renewal. Eva, once the girl David had thrown everything away for, now walked a different path. She married a principled young doctor who cherished her deeply. Together they raised two children, and William and Patricia Davidson became doting grandparents, softened by time and the wisdom of hard-earned lessons. And David Cooper, once so certain he deserved more than ordinary life, now found his truest peace in the very simplicity he once scorned. He sat at the dinner table each evening beside Anna and Katie, laughter and warmth echoing through the house. His happiness was modest, but untainted by deception. He had paid for his sins, not in public disgrace, but in the slow ache of memory and the long road back to decency. Justice had not arrived like thunder, but as quiet restoration. Evelyn received love, not born of fantasy, but of mutual respect. Eva learned the difference between infatuation and real partnership. And David found redemption, not in reclaiming the past, but in honoring the present. Life moved forward, measured but fair. And as this tale slips, like dusk, into the silent hollows of your thoughts, know that what you've read is more than a story. It is a reckoning, a heartbeat carved from truth, a whisper reminding you that even after ruin, a soul can choose light. It begins not with light, but with a hush, the hush of something breathing just beneath your skin. Not quite fear, not quite wonder, a feeling, electric and weightless, slipping between your ribs as words, carefully chosen, quietly dangerous, begin to unfold. Each syllable carries the sheen of something broken and beautiful, like glass glinting on a midnight road. These are no ordinary words. They fracture reality with their arrival, splitting the veneer of what we think we know from the Betrayal, aching mystery of what lies beneath. Every sentence stretches like a bridge across impossible distances, between seen and unseen, confessed and concealed, remembered and repressed, and in the middle of that trembling exponent is you. This is where stories breathe, feral, untamed, potent. Here, in this liminal corridor, they don't simply inform. They stir. They ache. They dare you to feel the heartbeat of another life as if it were your own. They brush the dust off long-buried fears, coax desire from its hiding place, and cradle the ember of fragile hopes you didn't even know you'd been guarding. This is the alchemy of storytelling. Digital confessions whispered into the vast, hungering dark. Faceless truths cloaked in anonymity but blazing with the heat of something real. And when you hear them, when you truly listen, something ancient stirs in you. Stirs in you, a tether pulling tight. The story is no longer theirs. It's yours now, twisted in the labyrinth of your thoughts, blooming in the shadows behind your eyes. And so you wonder, of course you do, what lies beyond the last spoken word? What story waits, trembling and half-born, just outside the reach of reason? What truths, unclaimed and shivering, hover in the silence, begging to be seen? Hold on to that question. Cradle the unease. Trace the shape of your curiosity like a scar or a spell, because that is the thread, the pulse, the sacred invitation that winds through all of us, to search, to feel, to follow. If your breath caught for even a moment, if the silence afterward felt heavier than it did before, then you've already crossed over. The story has worked its quiet spell on you. Its tendrils have wrapped gently, delicately around the fabric of your being. So when you leave this place, this sanctuary of flickering words and restless ghosts, do not forget what brushed against you here. Carry it, honor it, keep the flame lit. And if the story lingered in your bones like a chill, like a memory not quite yours, then join us. Subscribe to this gathering of seekers who chase after shadows, who name the nameless, who refuse to look away from the dark. Ring the bell, not just for the next tale, but for the call that echoes in every one. There is more, because we do not merely tell stories here. We summon them. We call forth the forgotten and bear the weight of what others left unspoken. And now, so do you. You, dear listener, are no longer on the outside. You are part of this ritual. Until the next whisper finds you in the hush between midnight and morning, stay sharp, stay tender, keep listening, and above all, never stop chasing the echo.